King Charles had reportedly turned Highgrove House into a fortress, and the reason behind the extraordinary lockdown was said to be far more serious than an ordinary dispute inside the royal family. According to the explosive story circulating behind closed doors, the crisis involved missing royal treasures, secret financial records, encrypted communications, hidden evidence, and a chain of events stretching from Windsor Castle to private accounts in Switzerland. There were even claims involving a locked storage facility near Swindon, a concealed laptop beneath a staircase, and a network of insiders who allegedly knew far more than they were willing to admit. Welcome viewers to my channel. Please subscribe, like my video and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. At first, the entire situation sounded like the plot of a royal crime thriller. But the deeper the story went, the more disturbing the timeline became. Why had Highgrove been sealed so suddenly? Why were communication systems reportedly disconnected? And if the lockdown had truly caught everyone by surprise, how could a hidden emergency communication system already have been operating inside the estate? The alleged events began shortly after sunrise at Highgrove. A pale mist reportedly covered the gardens as King Charles emerged from his private study carrying what witnesses described as a sealed document. The paper was said to be unusually formal, marked with royal insignia and secured inside a protective folder. He walked across the gravel path wearing a dark country jacket, heavy trousers, and boots dampened by the morning air. Moments later, security officers moved toward the estate's main entrance. The large iron gates were pulled shut. Heavy locks were secured. And according to the story, the sound of metal striking metal echoed across the quiet grounds. Within minutes, the atmosphere at Highgrove had completely changed. Staff members reportedly noticed that several communication systems had stopped working. External phone lines were disconnected. Internet equipment was removed from service. Mobile signal devices inside parts of the residence were switched off. Security personnel began moving through the property, restricting access to private areas and monitoring every entrance. The alleged order was described as an emergency containment measure. Queen Camilla was said to have been placed under strict security restrictions while investigators examined claims that confidential information connected to royal property had been transmitted outside the estate. The decision reportedly followed an urgent meeting between King Charles and Prince William the previous evening. But before we continue, subscribe to Crown Watch and turn on notifications for more royal stories, hidden mysteries, and dramatic developments surrounding the monarchy. Now, according to the story, Prince William had arrived with information that changed the entire situation. The evidence allegedly connected individuals within Camilla's wider household circle to the disappearance of valuable historical objects. And these were not ordinary household possessions. The missing items were said to include rare silver pieces, antique porcelain, ceremonial objects, and valuable artifacts connected to the history of the monarchy. One particularly dramatic claim involved a ceremonial mace that had supposedly been replaced years earlier with a convincing imitation. The estimated value of the objects allegedly sold through hidden intermediaries was reported to be more than £4 million. Financial records were said to point toward accounts in London and Zurich. And according to the allegations, the names connected to those accounts led investigators toward people believed to be close to Camilla's private circle. That was the central accusation. But the strange events surrounding the Highgrove lockdown created even more questions. Officials allegedly claimed that the communications shutdown was necessary to prevent the destruction of evidence. Intelligence reports supposedly suggested that encrypted applications had been used inside the estate to transfer sensitive documents to outside contacts. Security officers reportedly disconnected the main systems one by one. Yet something unexpected happened after the power was cut. A handheld signal detector allegedly identified an active transmission beneath the main staircase. Investigators followed the signal toward a narrow utility space hidden behind a locked panel. Inside, they reportedly discovered an auxiliary battery connected to a concealed satellite communication device. Behind a stack of old gardening records sat a portable computer. And according to the story, the device was still transmitting encrypted information nearly 40 minutes after the estate's main communication systems had been shut down. That discovery immediately created a major problem. If nobody knew that a lockdown was coming, why was there already a hidden backup system capable of operating independently? Who had installed it? Who had supplied the battery? And why had the computer been hidden behind estate records? The laptop was reportedly running specialized encryption software. Investigators allegedly discovered that information was being sent to a remote server connected to an address in London. The identity associated with the computer was not immediately revealed. But the discovery suggested that someone inside Highgrove may have expected the estate's communication systems to be shut down. Or perhaps someone had prepared for the possibility long before the emergency began. The computer was reportedly placed inside a protected evidence container and transferred to a specialist cyber investigation unit. At the same time, additional security personnel arrived outside the estate. Unmarked vehicles appeared along the surrounding roads. Access points were monitored, and Highgrove was allegedly transformed from a private royal residence into a tightly controlled security zone. Inside, anxiety began spreading among members of the household. Staff gathered near the main staircase, quietly asking one another what had happened. Some looked toward the closed doors leading to the private rooms. Others watched security officers moving through the corridors. Then the estate manager reportedly approached the security team. He wanted to know why the morning mail had been stopped. He asked why staff phones were being temporarily collected. They seemed like reasonable questions. But when investigators examined his personal phone, they allegedly found something unexpected. There were 3 missed calls from an unidentified international number. The calls had originated in Switzerland. And according to the timeline, they had arrived only minutes before the lockdown began. That detail immediately raised suspicion. If the emergency operation had been confidential, how could someone outside the country have known that something was about to happen? Investigators reportedly traced the number to a private financial organization believed to have handled accounts associated with several anonymous companies. Those companies were allegedly connected to the missing artifact investigation. Suddenly, the estate manager was no longer viewed as someone who simply handled maintenance and daily operations. The story claimed that investigators suspected he may have acted as a communication link between the estate and financial contacts outside the United Kingdom. A second encrypted conversation was reportedly found on his phone. The messages allegedly included a list of 7 historical objects scheduled to be transported later that evening. A private airfield in Gloucestershire was mentioned as a possible departure location. If the claims were true, the lockdown had not merely interrupted a past operation. It may have stopped an active transfer. The objects were allegedly scheduled to leave the country within hours. Had the security operation been delayed, investigators feared the artifacts might have disappeared permanently into a network of private collectors and hidden companies. The timing appeared too precise to ignore. But the story became even more complicated when details emerged about the evidence Prince William had supposedly presented to King Charles. According to the account, William entered a secure archive beneath Windsor Castle carrying a heavy metal case. 2 protection officers followed him. Several large boxes filled with financial documents were brought into a reinforced examination room. The records were placed across a long wooden table beneath bright overhead lights. The documents allegedly showed that valuable objects had been moved through private companies over several years. Money from the sales was reportedly transferred through financial channels in London and Zurich. But the most important question was not where the money had gone. It was how the objects had been removed without triggering the palace inventory system. Prince William reportedly presented an old maintenance authorization. The document claimed that electronic tracking equipment had needed emergency repairs. According to the story, the inventory scanners were disabled for 3 consecutive days. The authorization had allegedly passed through a senior administrative office connected to Camilla's private staff. That created a troubling possibility. Someone may have used an official maintenance request to create a temporary gap in the palace's security system. During that period, valuable objects could allegedly have been removed before anyone noticed that the original items were gone. If true, the operation would have required planning. It would have required access. It would have required knowledge of internal procedures. And it would have required people with enough authority to make security systems temporarily disappear without attracting attention. The story claimed that William then opened a smaller leather record book. Inside was a handwritten list describing replacement objects. Several missing artifacts had allegedly been substituted with replicas. The copies were said to contain imitation hallmarks designed to resemble those used on royal objects centuries earlier. That raised another question: who had created the replacements? Producing convincing replicas of historic royal artifacts would require specialized knowledge, expensive equipment, and access to detailed records. The alleged operation could not have depended on one person. It appeared to involve a larger network. William reportedly presented another document, a certified record from a private gallery in Zurich. The document allegedly described the sale of 2 antique silver wall pieces to an unidentified buyer. The reported price was £800,000. The transaction was said to have taken place only weeks before King Charles's coronation. According to the story, the gallery may have served as an intermediary, allowing valuable objects to move through brokers while concealing their original ownership. But moving historic royal property outside the United Kingdom would normally require official documentation. So how had the objects allegedly left the country? Investigators reportedly discovered a questionable export certificate. The paperwork claimed that the items were being sent overseas temporarily for an international exhibition. However, the exhibition described in the documents could not be verified. The export authorization allegedly contained a forged government stamp. The official whose name appeared on the documents had reportedly left public service and moved abroad. The method described in the story was particularly disturbing. The objects were not supposedly carried out through secret tunnels. They were not hidden in the middle of the night. They were allegedly transported through official channels using documents that made the shipments appear legitimate. That would mean the system itself had been used to conceal the operation. Investigators reportedly found an address book containing coded names and financial information. When King Charles examined one page, he allegedly recognized the handwriting. The story did not reveal what he said, but the reaction suggested that the investigation might reach beyond the royal household. Meanwhile, another operation was reportedly unfolding near Swindon. Police officers allegedly arrived at a climate-controlled storage facility carrying a search authorization. They examined a series of locked containers. When one of the crates was opened, investigators reportedly found antique silver plates bearing a historic royal symbol. The objects had allegedly disappeared from a private chapel collection several years earlier. Official records had listed them as missing following renovation work. But according to the story, they had not been lost. They had been carefully stored inside a commercial unit. The objects were protected by custom packaging. And beneath the protective material, investigators reportedly discovered a shipping label connected to a company that regularly supplied equipment for private royal events. The company's vehicles allegedly had routine access to palace service entrances. Because the trucks carried catering supplies, tableware, linens, and event equipment, they were reportedly treated as trusted deliveries. The alleged scheme exploited that trust. Valuable objects could supposedly have been placed inside containers associated with routine event operations. Security officers might have focused on what entered the palace while paying less attention to what left after an event. The story suggested that valuable artifacts may have been moved beneath ordinary catering equipment. The operation was said to have been organized around regular delivery schedules. And because the vehicles appeared familiar, they attracted little attention. Investigators reportedly found additional cases beneath a protective covering. One allegedly contained the ceremonial mace that had supposedly been replaced years earlier. Forensic specialists then discovered a small electronic device connected to the display area. The device was said to interfere with security signals. According to the allegations, it created a temporary period during which a display case could be opened without immediately alerting the control room. The equipment was reportedly linked to technology normally restricted to specialized security operations. That discovery created another disturbing possibility. Could individuals with advanced technical knowledge have helped weaken the protection systems? Back at Highgrove, the restrictions surrounding Camilla reportedly became even tighter. Her personal secretary and 2 administrative assistants were escorted from the property. The head of domestic staff entered the drawing room. Camilla was said to be standing near an unlit fireplace. The staff member placed a leather case on a nearby table and explained that several employees were being questioned about unauthorized communications. Investigators allegedly believed that internal records had been transferred to outside contacts. Shipping information, inventory documents, and private schedules were reportedly included in the material. Then came another dramatic discovery. The personal secretary was allegedly accused of attempting to destroy several appointment diaries shortly before investigators entered the administrative offices. One damaged page was reportedly recovered. The document allegedly contained dates of private meetings held at a luxury hotel in London. Several of the appointments reportedly occurred around the same time that valuable objects disappeared from royal storage areas. One entry had been circled. The identity of the person connected to that meeting was not revealed. But investigators reportedly wanted to know whether an influential financial supporter had helped fund the alleged transfers. Camilla did not respond. According to the story, she turned away and looked toward the closed doors. The people who had surrounded her were gone. The estate had become silent. Outside, security officers continued walking across the grounds. As afternoon approached, the atmosphere inside Highgrove became increasingly tense. A simple tray was brought into the room. It contained tea and a single porcelain cup. When Camilla reportedly asked whether any deliveries had arrived, she was told that outside vehicles were being turned away. But one package had already entered the estate before the security restrictions were fully established. The envelope was addressed to her private secretary. It was brought into the room inside a clear evidence container. Inside was a flash drive. There was also a handwritten message. The note reportedly instructed the recipient to erase local computer systems before investigators could recover information. The message appeared to be connected to an outside source. According to the story, investigators believed the sender had previously been associated with questionable property records and financial documentation. The people outside the estate were still attempting to communicate with those inside. They appeared to be trying to erase evidence before the investigation expanded. The flash drive was connected to a protected examination device. A small indicator light began flashing. Camilla watched as investigators prepared to examine the information. Every remaining communication route was now being monitored. The lockdown had become nearly complete. 2 security officers moved closer to the room. They were waiting for further instructions from the sovereign's office. But an operation of this scale could not remain only a private royal matter. According to the story, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer received an emergency message at 10 Downing Street. The document was reportedly delivered through a secure government channel. Senior ministers were called into a private meeting. Legal advisors were asked whether the royal order could authorize emergency restrictions involving household property and financial records. The alleged decree was described as relying on old constitutional powers connected to the protection of royal institutions. However, the legal claims surrounding the story remained unclear. What was certain was that the operation had reportedly bypassed normal administrative procedures. The message had not traveled through